Under normal situations, it might be a red flag, but with the SMIs, they do weird stuff all the time. Like, he's just like kind of walking in front. So I open the gate, and as soon as I open the gate, he turns around and he comes at me. I didn't know that he had a pencil and he's stabbing me in the face. I thought that he was just punching me.
Jaycee Reidhead grew up in Arizona, and a traumatic incident in high school set her on a mission to change the criminal justice system. Instead of going straight to law school, she put her plans on hold and spent 7 intense years working as a correctional officer in some of Arizona's highest security prisons, including units housing severely mentally ill inmates. In those years, she faced assaults, chaos, and even survived being stabbed by an inmate. Now, Jaycee is finally pursuing her dream of becoming a lawyer, using the lessons she learned behind prison walls to fuel her next chapter. Jaycee, welcome to Locked In.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Yeah, sorry for dragging you out in the cold here. I know you came from Arizona where it's 100 degrees.
No, it's kind of nice, not dying of heat, so.
Yeah, and you're spending a couple of days in New York City.
Yeah. Well, we visited a few places around Manhattan, obviously the big tourist spots, but yeah, it's been fun.
Is that your first time in New York City?
It is, so it's kind of like a shock of how actually massive it is and how many people, and I wasn't expecting to be, shoulder checking everybody, but no, it's been fun.
Yeah, what's been the biggest surprise in New York City for someone that's never been?
I just really think the people. I think you imagine how many people are there, and then you actually get there and you're like, wow, I'm surrounded by tons of people.
Yeah, and everyone's in their own world. Everyone has a different story and a different life and is doing their different thing and has a different place to go, which is super interesting and puts it into perspective when you look at it from that angle.
Yeah, and then you're looking around and you're like, people live in all these windows that I'm looking at, and it was crazy. I think probably the biggest emotional impact of it was we went to the 9/11 memorial, and that was really, as someone who was really little living through it, not obviously being near here or anything, but that was pretty good spot to see.
And you saw The Lion King.
And The Lion King.
Great play. That's my favorite Broadway play.
Yeah, it was really good.
Did you grow up in Arizona?
Yeah. So I wasn't born in Arizona. I was born in Utah. My family's from Utah, but we moved to Arizona when I was 3 or 4 years old and stayed there ever since.
Big family?
A big extended family. I'm the oldest of 5, so, a big immediate family. And then my dad has 7 siblings.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I have 30-something first cousins on my dad's side. My mom's side is smaller, but that's just families in Utah.
Were your siblings boys, girls, mix?
A mix, so there's 2 girls, 2 boys, with me being the oldest. And so it was kind of a fun dynamic being the oldest one and in charge of all of them.
Is there a big age gap?
No, so it's me, and then 2 years below me is my sister, and then 3 years it's my brother, and then my brother and my other sister, they're 18 months apart, and then the youngest was, I think, 5 years after that. So. And
did your parents stay together your whole childhood?
Yeah, and they're still together now, so
great.
Never had to experience anything, divorce or anything, which was good. Growing up, it was really easy, I guess. I didn't have, we were middle class. My dad is a lawyer and my mom's a nurse, but she stayed home for, I think, most of my childhood and never really had any issues, went to public school. And it wasn't until my high school where things kind of started to get. So I'm the only one in my immediate family, of siblings, that doesn't have a substance abuse issue. Once I started getting to high school is when they started to get into their substance abuse issues. And being the oldest, it was hard because, you want to be the one that's looking out for them and taking charge and helping them, but you really can't because with substance abuse, it's a very personal thing that they deal with, and it affects the family, but if they don't want help, then there's really nothing that you can do. So I watched them struggle with it, and then my parents too. So it kind of put on me that I didn't want to burden them any extra with issues that I had. Even though they were small, I didn't have a whole lot of issues at the time, but you see your parents struggling and you don't want to add to it at all. And especially with like the level that my siblings were struggling with, anything that I felt I was struggling with was like, oh, it's not that bad, you know? So you kind of learn to put it down and compartmentalize. And in high school, I think the start of, I wouldn't really say my downhill, because, and I'll get into it, but so I was sexually assaulted in high school, and it kind of changed the way that I viewed like everything in the world around me at the time. And I really learned where people will take advantage of you. Like they see a weakness, or they see you as a weakness, and then they'll take advantage of it. So really early on, I learned to not trust anybody, which came in handy later in my job. But at the time, it was hard to reconcile that and to kind of, I don't know, get through it, I guess, on my own. And I didn't tell anybody. Nothing really came out of it. It was just kind of like it happened. And I was like, I don't know how to deal with this, so I'm just not going to deal with it. And that's what I did. In the way that and my siblings, they dealt with they turned to substance abuse for their stressors that they had. And so I didn't want to turn to that for me. And it wasn't really my thing. Like, I mean, I smoked weed and I drank and stuff, but that wasn't, like, I didn't have a problem with it, you know? So I turned to, like, studying. So I went to the University of Arizona for college, and I just went all in. I was like, I want to go to law school. That's what I wanted to do. And I think in part it was from that trauma. I was like, I'm going to be someone that can help victims. I'm going to be like an advocate. I want to be the person that I needed at that time. But yeah, so I just went all in on school. Like I made the dean's list like every semester. I graduated summa cum laude, which is like 3.8 GPA, and with honors at the honors college. So I really went all in on school, and I was just like, I'm just going to dive into it and hopefully come out of that. And it was like a month before graduation where I was like, I can't go to law school. I was like I told people I was like burnt out from school and just being, from kindergarten through high school and then straight to college and then straight to another 3 years of law school. I told people, I was like, I just want a break. But I think for me, really, what it was like my goals was to be an advocate. And then I was like, well, how can I help people if I'm not really even helping myself? So I kind of doubted myself that I could even do it. So I didn't. And then, it was figuring out what I was going to do. I graduated. And then kind of in the months after that, just thinking about what I was going to do. Like, I need a job. I need something that's pretty stable. So I turned to corrections. Well, originally it was I'm going to try to go into law enforcement and see what I can get out of that. Because there's different ways of being an advocate, right? I thought originally maybe I wanted to go into law, but then I was thinking, well, maybe I can go into law enforcement and try to do that. And what people were telling me is like an easy stepping stone is corrections, because the requirements are lower, the academy's shorter, and it's a little bit easier. And so that's what I did. So it was 2018 when I started the academy, and it's kind of funny because my parents were like, what are you doing? Like, you were going to go to law school, and now you're going to go into corrections? Okay. They were supportive.
What was their career background?
So my dad was a lawyer, so I wanted to follow him, and try to do what he did. But he does estate planning, trust administration, more transactional law than like in the courtroom, like that you would kind of think of. And my mom's a nurse. She stayed at home for most of what I can remember, but then like recently she started going back. She's a school nurse now. But they didn't have any like military or law enforcement background. I don't think nobody in my family went into law enforcement, so it was kind of like okay, that's cool, but also why? And they didn't really peg me as somebody that could do it. Like, I mean, they're like, yeah, you're tough. Yeah, like you can handle yourself. Like you got your shit together. But at the same time, I think maybe they kind of like wondered if I was really cut out for it. And so I went to the academy, and it was, I think, 6 or 7 weeks at the time that I went. I think it's changed now, but it was 6 or 7 weeks, and I really liked it. I know a lot of people don't, but it was kind of, I mean, I didn't really take it to heart. Like, like they're yelling at you and they're like telling you to do push-ups, and I'm just like, okay. Like, I wasn't the one that was like getting offended by them screaming at you, and I don't know, it was just all kind of part of the game. And that's kind of what I saw it as. I'm like, they're doing this because it's like this game, this mental game to try and like get in your head of like, oh, this is what it's going to be like, and if you can handle this, then maybe you can kind of handle being in prison, but it's really not even the same.
Do the men and women train together?
Yeah.
Would you say there was more men or more women or an equal amount?
There was definitely more men, but there was a lot more women than I was anticipating. It was probably, like in a class of 30, 35, there was probably like 8 or 9 of us women. So it wasn't totally even, but it was definitely more than I thought initially. I thought I might be like one of the only ones, but there was more of us, which was good, actually.
Were you one of the younger ones?
Yeah, we were all kind of the same age. There was like, there was a few people who were older. I think the oldest guy in the class was in his 50s, because they don't have like an age cap in Arizona for the state, at least. So people kind of go into it as a second career. Like they'll retire from even former law enforcement or military, and then they'll go into corrections. But I think the majority of us were pretty young. I was 24 when I started, so it was definitely a young a young crowd. But no, it was pretty good. We did a lot of stuff that they don't do now, which I find interesting. There was one part where they call it like the fight for life, where you're up against somebody that has like pads on, and they spray you, and then you have to like fight them and get your radio and initiate and do the whole thing. And that was fun. To an extent, people were like kind of weird about it, which might be why they don't do it anymore, but I think it was a good experience and something that everybody needed to kind of go through, because that's like, yeah, you could go through that at the job, and I certainly did, but it was definitely an experience.
No, when you say spray, it's like pepper spray?
Yeah, the pepper spray, and it's like like point blank to your face. And never having done anything like that before, it's definitely not something that you can't really like imagine it until you go through it, and then you expect it, and it's definitely not as bad as I thought it was, but it's also as bad.
Were you into sports or anything in high school?
Yeah, so I did track and soccer and softball for a long time. So I was athletic, and I also did, I won I wouldn't say won, but I came in first for the women in the fitness for my academy class. They kind of did like a ranking system, and I came in first, which in my opinion wasn't really that hard, because it was like do 20 push-ups and then run this 1.5 miles in like under 15 minutes. So it wasn't really like difficult for me, but I think a lot of the women that I remember kind of struggled with it a little bit, and the men too, which, people think of corrections as not much of a physical as much as like military or, other police. But it definitely is, and it should be. It's a very physically demanding job, and I don't think people really anticipate it if they're coming in, and especially if they lower standards for the academy like they have been. I don't think it's doing them any favors. But
What's something you think training lacked, looking back on it now?
I thought it was lax as it was, and so that's why hearing like the standards have been lowered even more was surprising to me, because I thought at the time it was really easy. And I thought that they should have been even, more strict about it, because, I mean, if you think about it, like there was this one girl that I remember, she was struggling to pass the fitness portion of it because she was struggling to do, I think it was like 5 or 10 push-ups. And in my head, I'm like, okay, well, if you're struggling to push yourself up off the ground, how can you reliably be how can you be somebody that I could rely on in an actual situation, to help me or to help anybody else? And I think that's another part of it, why just women in general weren't taken as seriously in the job. We're just obviously viewed as weaker, and in that situation, you're kind of proving that. So you want to be somebody that meets the standards so that people can rely on you. So that was kind of surprising to me in the academy. Otherwise, I feel like they did a pretty good job at preparing me. I mean, at the end of the day, nobody can really prepare you for actually being in prison. Like nobody can prepare you for walking in and what you're actually going to be doing and seeing on the job. One of the things that they did pretty good that they don't do anymore, as far as I know, is they'll actually take you to the prison while you're still at the academy. So you're there. I was there for 2 days, or I did like 2 shifts there instead of going to the academy. So there was kind of like a rumor where wherever you went for those 2 days, that was going to be the unit that you would go to when you graduated. And the unit that I went to was kind of like a lower custody medical yard. It was kind of like how I would expect. It was like a dorm setting, and it was kind of open. People were like walking around, I didn't really say anything that crazy. So I was like, okay, I can do this. This isn't that bad. And it's funny because I had done martial arts out of college. Through college and kind of like out of college, I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Muay Thai. And at the time, I had competed a little bit. I got my blue belt, and so I was doing fights and competitions and stuff. So I was sparring quite a bit. And I had these bruises and like cuts on my knuckles. And I thought they were pretty healed and, it was not noticeable. But I remember standing like in the chow hall line, and I was like taking names. And one of the inmates comes up and he's like giving the ID or whatever. And he like looks at my hands and he's like, "You a fighter?" Just like immediately clocks it. And I was like, I didn't really know what to say. Like I hadn't thought that would even come up. So I hadn't like pre-planned a response or anything. So I was just like, yeah, I fight. And in my head, I'm like, well, this is something that they can know about me, and I don't mind because, it's a pretty good thing if they know that I can fight. So I was just like, yeah, I train. That was always my response, like, I train. And he's like, okay. Like, just like kind of like looking at you like, okay. And that was it.
Do you think they bring you to a easy facility like that for the walkthrough just to not scare you off? Like, do they do that on purpose?
Probably, because looking back at like where everybody went, they were all like lower custody units. I was the only one from my class that went to this specific unit though, and I don't know though, because like the people that went to the other units, they ended up staying there, but I didn't stay where I was at. I went to a higher custody when I actually got there.
Maybe they knew you were the toughest.
Maybe, I don't know. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, and I never actually went back to that unit, other than like transports and stuff. But I never went back.
Did you ever have second thoughts at all throughout training?
Honestly, it was probably the second day where I was like, "What the fuck am I doing here? Is this really like what I want to be doing?" And I'm like, at the time, I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna get through the academy. I'm gonna get there, and if I don't like it, I can quit. There's a high enough, turnover rate where it wouldn't really be, frowned upon so much. But I wanted to really give it a shot. I was like, I signed up for this. I'm in the academy. Like, I don't want to drop out. That's like one thing about me is like when I set my mind to do something, I really want to see it out and finish it. And so I was like, I'm going to do this. And if I don't like it, then I don't have to continue on. But at least I can say that I tried it.
What did your siblings think while you were in training? Were you living at home still, or did you move out?
No, I was living on my own. I moved out when I was 18, and I think I moved back once for a brief period of time, but they thought I was crazy. They're like, "You're going to go work in a prison? Like, what's wrong with you?" They're like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, obviously deep down there was a lot of underlying traumas going on, but it was so much like I couldn't even recognize that at the time, because like I said, I had like stuffed it down, and I'm like, I need to do something. I need to, like, if I just do stuff, then I won't have to think about things going on in my head. And that's kind of what school was. And then after school ended, I was like, I need a job to completely fill up all the space in my head. So they were supportive, but they were really like, why? What are you doing? But then it turned into, oh, tell me all the stories. And wow, you're so cool because you have all these stories. But yeah, at the time they were also dealing with a lot of their own stuff. So a lot of the things that I dealt with and went through, they never really knew or understood until later. Because it was when I started going, I went through the academy and I was working, and I was kind of away from my family for a lot. And that was kind of on purpose. They were dealing with a lot of their issues, and I just wanted to separate myself from the drama. And you can try to be there as much as you can, but, if people don't want help, then there's only so much that you can let them in your headspace. So, but I graduated from the academy, and that was pretty cool. And it was kind of nerve-wracking to think like, okay, well, the academy's over. Now I have to actually go there and work. But it was all right because they gave us, or they told us that they were giving us like an FTO. So we wouldn't totally be alone going in there. But
Which is a field training officer?
Yeah, field training officer. So I get there at like the HR, and I'm thinking I'm gonna go to the other place, the place that I'd been before. I already kind of knew, like, it was a small yard, so I pretty much like knew all the buildings. I'm like, okay, I know what I'm getting into. And like I had heard about, because obviously like when they tell you like where you're going, they kind of give you an overview of the units and how it's broken down. I wasn't the only one from Tucson. There were a few of us from Tucson, but there were a lot of people that were going to, like, it was for complexes all over that were in my class. So they broke it down for everybody kind of. So everybody had an idea of the units and what everything looked like. But we get there, and I'm thinking I'm going to go to the place where I was, which was called Manzanita. And they're like, Reidhead, you're going to Rincon, which was one of the higher custody units. And I was like, oh, okay. Because there were two that were the high custody. There's Cimarron and there's Rincon. And you didn't want to go to either of them. allegedly, that people said, because they're higher custody, they require a lot more of yourself to be there. It's not so easy to manage the inmate population that's there. But they were 12 hours, so the way that the units were split up is a lot of the other ones were 8-hour shifts, and then Rincon was the only 12-hour shift. And I wanted the 12 hours. So I was kind of happy that I got to work there because I wanted the 12-hour shifts.
So you only had to do 4 days a week?
Yeah, it was 4 days on, 4 days off, 3 days on, 3 days off. So the 3 to 4 days off were really nice working there. And it kind of made up for being there 12 hours. And especially doing overtime, it makes it really easy to do overtime when you have more days off to do overtime.
Do they give you a higher pay for working at a higher custody level?
They should, but they don't. They call it hazard pay, and I think it's changed now, but at least when I was working there, it was like a couple bucks more on your paycheck.
An hour or just in general?
Just in general.
For working there?
For working, yeah. I always said that there should be unit differential. It would make sense, right? Higher custody require you to do really more work. But no.
What were some of the stories you were hearing about these higher custody levels while you're in training? Because I'm sure people talk, like any job when you're training.
Yeah. So what I had heard from this specific unit was it was actually pretty recent, before, like, within 6 months of me getting there, there was a murder on the rec field. And, well, actually, there was a murder on the rec field, and then there was another murder in one of the houses, and then they had a mini riot. Like, this is within 6 months of me getting there. So I was like, okay, I'm getting in, like, this is where I'm going. And it was actually within those 6 months, I think, that they had changed over to two things. One was IHP, which is the Integrated Housing Program, where they were trying to limit race-related issues by integrating people based on race. Originally, that had caused a lot of problems that I think had happened before I got there. But when I got there, that's what it was. They were IHP. And they have to sign into the program. So you don't have to. But obviously, if you were a certain custody level and you didn't want to be IHP, you were going to go to Cimarron, or you were going to go to a different complex. So sometimes it was like you do or you don't, or if you don't want to go to Cimarron, well, you're going to sign in. But a lot of people had the issues with signing because once you sign, sometimes you couldn't go back to regular GP because you had signed. So, I mean, there were a lot of issues with that, but nothing from really that I saw because, like, I hadn't gone there yet. And then, so there was that, and then they had also turned half of the yard to SMI, or severely mentally ill. So they were kind of starting to institute this mental health program that really wasn't fully fleshed out. It was kind of like, because on the yard there was a suicide watch house, and then 3 designated houses for SMI. One was kind of like a lower functioning, and then the other 2 were for the higher functioning. And it was kind of like, okay, we're going to put these inmates here and kind of do some mental health programs, but also we don't really know what we're doing yet. So it was a really new thing when I started, that even up to administration staff, they really hadn't fully, it wasn't like a fully formed program yet. And so, and it even changed, like, I think throughout my 7-ish years, it was like every 6 months it was changing. And so I started, and it's funny because my FTO was on annual leave for like 2 weeks of my training. And they didn't have anybody else to put, it was me and this other girl, and they didn't have anybody else to really put us with. They're like, okay, just go help out on the yard. And we're like, and do what? We're like, Okay. And so they put us with one of the yard officers, but he wasn't an FTO. So he's like, just go do perimeters. I don't know. And so we were like, okay, what are the perimeter? What are the perimeters? And so they kind of had to like guide us around. And once you do it once, it's really like you can do it, the rest of the time. But it's like, hey, go do this. And you don't really know what you're doing. So we're like, okay, we're just going to wing it. And if we get lost, like, oh, well.
Did you have to put on like a certain demeanor? Because you don't want to look like that fish out of water as an officer your first day on the job.
We tried to, but it just comes across anyway. Like people can kind of see it. The inmates definitely saw it, and it's funny because there's such high turnover, and at the time they were doing a lot of cross-leveling, which is where COs from other units are being sent to units that are shorter staffed to work there for their shift. So there was a lot of like mix of people. So they didn't initially know that we were new. So when they're telling us to go do these things and we're doing them, like we're supposed to be with our FTO, but we're doing regular like work because we don't have an FTO who's here. And the other COs that are a little bit more experienced are just telling us to go do stuff. And then like the other COs around, they don't know that we're new. So you kind of have to just wing it. And that was like one of the first instances that I can remember where I'm just like, if you just look like you know what you're doing, nobody really says anything. And that came in handy, and I didn't have anybody like there was no hand holding. It was like, you're just going to go do this, which I thought was good. It worked for me. I know there's a lot of people it probably wouldn't work for, but
What type of inmates were housed in this facility?
So they were a higher custody if they were like rated like level 4, sometimes like level 3. It wasn't like a maximum custody, so it was like a semi-open yard. So in the housing units, the doors, there were actual doors. It wasn't like a bay setting. It was like 2-door room, and there's like a door all the way down. And there's like a rec field. They had to be escorted everywhere. Supposed to. So escorted to chow and back, escorted to rec and back. And anywhere that they were going, there was supposed to be an escort. And it definitely didn't turn out that way, just because of short staff. So what I learned really quickly is that there's what you're supposed to do, and then there's what you actually do. And it was hard because, starting out, they tell you in the academy, like, you have to follow policy. You have to follow policy. Policy. They drill it into you. And yes, you have to follow policy, but if there's nobody to escort these guys that you have to send out to education, and they're calling you and calling you and calling you to send them, like, what are you supposed to do? So, like, you ask your supervisor, hey, I have to send these guys, but I've been calling the yard and there's no escorts. What do you want me to do? Just send them. Okay. So, out the door, And it's hard because as a CO, you're like, I'm going to follow what my supervisors tell me, but I'm also bound by these policies. Like, I want to do the right thing, but I also don't want to get yelled at or written up on my supervisors, so you're kind of, like, in this hard position. And the supervisors, too, like, they have their supervisors. It's like, well, why are, like, the yard functions slow? Or, like, why isn't chow getting done? It's like, well, we don't have staff. Figure it out. So that's kind of what it turned into. And then I watched and I learned really early on that that's how it worked. And it wasn't hard to get used to. It got to a point where I actually kind of like enjoyed I had a good group of yard officers that we worked together for the most part. And my FTO did come back. He was working the SMI building, so I got to work a little bit with him there for the rest of my time for my on my FTO training. And that was like, you think, like when you hear severely mentally ill and you think like in prison, you kind of have like an expectation of like, oh, these are going to be like really crazy people. And it was weird because like, yeah, they're there, but the vast majority that I saw just seemed like kind of like regular people. And they don't really get into like the designations that much when you're there, as far as like how people are designated SMI. Like they could have anxiety and they're designated SMI, you know what I mean? So it's not always somebody who's like on the outside really crazy. It could be just somebody who's dealing with like severe depression, or somebody who's been on meds on the streets and they come in and that's their diagnoses. And so that was kind of interesting too, to see just a lot of what seemed like regular people, inmates to me, that they're SMI. They're not really that, like, you think like they're not really that crazy. But then sometimes the crazy comes out. So you're like, oh, okay, that's why you're here.
Are they treated worse in the SMI unit?
Like the really crazy.
Or do they separate it by really crazy to be kind of midline, or is everyone lumped in together?
Sometimes. So it just depends on how they can house people, because there's certain requirements on how you can house people. Like if they have do not houses against other people in the building, well, they can't be in this building, they have to be over here. There was one house where it was kind of like unofficially the low functioning guys. And I don't think it was really intended to be that way. It was just like, okay, these guys can't really house with the higher functioning guys because like they don't pick up after themselves, or they keep their cells really dirty, and then it causes like arguments and fights with these other guys. So we're going to put all these guys in this house and put these other guys in this house. So that's just the way that it kind of worked out on my yard. But there was one instance where it was kind of like really apparent to me about where I was. I was working one of the houses, one of the SMI houses, and they were out at rec, and the rec field was right in front of the building. So you just walk out of the building and you let them out, and it's the rec field. So I was walking out, and I just like walking, doing a check, and I see one of the inmates arguing with the lieutenant. And I'm kind of just like standing by and just like watching it. And he had his shirt off, and he had his shorts like rolled up really high. They were like super high up, and the lieutenant was telling him to unroll his shorts. And he said that he didn't want to. He's like, no, I'm not going to unroll my shorts. And there's like a fence separating them, right? And the lieutenant's like telling him like, you need to unroll your shorts. And, you know, to be fair, I don't know why the lieutenant was like so on this, because like for a lot of the SMI guys, you just kind of learn that there's some things that you would hold the standard for, you know, GP guys that you wouldn't hold the standard for the SMIs, just because there's like a level of lack of understanding, or you pick your battles, you know? Like if you know like, oh, there's so-and-so, he's just going to keep rolling his shorts up, like it's really not that big of a deal in the scheme of things if it keeps them on their baseline. And so they're like arguing back and forth, and the guy turns and he's like, okay, well, I'll just take him off. So he strips down and he's butt-ass naked, and he starts running straight towards me. And so I don't know, like, I'm just like looking, I'm like, what is he doing? Oh, he's running towards me, and he's naked. And it doesn't seem like he sees me at first. And then, mind you, this rec field also shares a fence with, like, the big GP rec field. So all those GP guys are out on rec, watching this happen, watching this naked SMI guy run right towards me. And I'm like, and then I hear my lieutenant over the radio being like, get him on the ground. And so I was like, okay, and I like call it his name, and I was like, stop running. Like, what are you doing? Get on the ground. And he sees me and he finally like registers that I'm like right there. And he's like, he starts freaking out. He's like, no, you can't see me. No. So he gets on his knees and he faces the rec field and he like puts his hands, I don't know, behind his head. And and he's like, I'm sorry. He keeps apologizing to me. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I don't want to like he didn't want to like expose himself to me. But the whole like rec field full of like GP guys, they're just laughing. They think it's hilarious. And they're like, giving me shit for that whole situation. And even like years later, I would like run into guys that were on the field and they would remember it. They're like, oh, remember that one time like that guy like ran at you who's naked? And I'm like, yeah, I remember. I try not to. But so, people came and they like cuffed him up. I don't remember exactly what happened after that, but that was like kind of one of those things where it's like you pick your battles with these guys, you know what I mean? Like if it's something really egregious, then you would address it, but like policy-wise, they tell you like no, they should be held to the same standard. But if you're dealing with somebody that doesn't have the same level of processing information or processing even what is expected of them, they don't even understand how to really function more than just eating and using you know what I mean? Like it's there's some of them that were a very level of low functioning to where you really couldn't expect much of them in that way. Which also made it hard for the higher functioning ones around them. So there was a lot of tension, a lot of fights that happen just because of the nature of people that you bring together. Yeah, like you have one guy in a cell who's just dirty and he's not cleaning up after himself. He's not cleaning and never washes his clothes because he doesn't really care. And you get another guy who wants things to be clean and orderly and obviously not have cockroaches all over your room, then it's going to cause a problem. So that was kind of like the biggest issues I found working in the SMI houses was just like the mix of people that you get, and they just don't always get along.
Is it harder to build a rapport from an officer's perspective with the SMI guys versus general population? It
can be. There were a lot of COs that just hated working with the SMIs. Like they would get cross-leveled and they would not want to go out and interact with them. They're like, I don't want to be around these guys. Like they're stupid, they don't understand, or like they're scary, they're unpredictable. People didn't want to deal with it. And the thing with the SMIs is that they really needed consistency. So they wanted to see like the same people over and over again, right? So if you had new people all the time who, every CO has a different way of doing things. And if they can't expect consistency from a day-to-day basis, it makes it harder for them to function. So it would cause a lot of problems if COs that didn't want to work there and they didn't have a rapport and they didn't really care to understand, that's where a lot of problems would come in too. So they tried to keep, like if you wanted to work the SMI houses and you were, pretty good at it, like the supervisors would keep you there. And it was like sort of a specialty post where at the time you had to put in for it and you had to like put in a memo of interest, like you wanted to work the house or the program or whatever it was at the time, like to state that you wanted to work there. And so that way they would keep the same people like on rotation, like throughout the shifts. So it did help, like, because the more that you're around them, the more that you talk to them and the more that you understand their baseline and, oh, that's normal for that guy. And like, I remember in one building, this guy, clockwork sometimes would just start screaming, and if you had never worked there before, you would start freaking out. Like, why is this guy screaming? Like, and then you go see and he's just like screaming. You have no idea what's going on. But as somebody who's like been there every day, you'd understand like, okay, that's just, he does that.
Do you think that there needed to be another level of training to work the SMI unit, like in the academy, or even if you were selected to work in that unit?
They did. Once they turned it into like a fully operational SMI, they started doing SMI training. I didn't get it initially because it was so new. They sent a bunch of us to Florence for like 3 days of training for SMIs. And it was basically just like people come and talk to you. Like you have PowerPoints. They give you like a workbook kind of. You learn about the different mental health disorders, personality disorders, just like a basic psychology class kind of. And to be honest, I don't think it ever really prepared you for what you're actually seeing. Because at the time, Tucson was really new for the mental health program. It was mostly in Iman, which is across the street from Florence. They had their mental health program there. But yeah, it wasn't really. It gave an overview, so if like you had never dealt with anything mental health related, I guess it would be a good way to kind of get like a brief crash course on it. But to actually deal with an actually mentally ill inmate population, I don't think it did a good job.
Now, do these individuals, do you think that they deserve to be locked up in there, or do you think that they need to have a different type of rehabilitation center or a psychology or a psych type facility rather than just throw them in a prison from your own perspective?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, I have my own, and I was going to get into it a little bit later with what I'm currently doing now, but it's hard to say because, on one hand, you do want to see justice for victims and that somebody's paying for the crime, but, essentially these are people that need help. They need help that they never got either in childhood or, in their current situation. And a lot of the times the crimes that are done are acted out of desperation because of those situations that they're put in. And a lot of it's environmental. And I will say that from what I experienced, a lot of it was also drug induced. There was like a high level of like drug induced paranoias, just people that had smoked spice once and they were like their brain was gone. And there's no help for that in the prison so much. I mean, you're in prison and now you have to just do your time, but where's the real help for the issues that come from whatever was before? So if you're experiencing homelessness or mental health issues before or family issues, like the majority of these people are going to be out. There's a very small percentage of people that are in for life. So, if they're not getting the help they need in prison and then they're not going to get the help they need when they leave, they're just going to come back. And I saw that a lot too.
What was the first situation in your first weeks or months of you being in the prison where it kind of lived up to the hype of what they were saying these types of facilities were like during training?
So within like 6 or 7 months of me working there, I was asked to start working in the Suicide Watch House. That was my first like real posting. And it was cool because, the people that worked there, we got to wear like the stab vests and nobody else wore the stab vests. So you're like, okay, we're the cool kids wearing the stab vests. But it was a lot more than that in like actually working there. So you're one of 4 and the way that they had it set up was when you're sent to Suicide Watch, you're initially on a continuous watch, which is having somebody sit there and watch you for continuously until you're taken off watch. And then it went to like a 10-minute where you just walk around every 10 minutes and have to sign for whatever it is that they're doing. And then it went to a 30-minute. And on each level, you're given certain things. So like on a continuous watch, you're really not allowed anything other than the suicide smock. And then on a 10-minute, you're allowed like paper or like a different, like the food would be different. We'd prepare it differently based on your level. So like you wouldn't have a tray, you'd have like a dinner sack, something that you wouldn't be able to really harm yourself with. Like no forks, no pencils, no really anything else that you could potentially harm yourself with. And then 30-minute is where you're kind of like, okay, you're off watch almost. Like you're going to have regular clothes and then like food. I think it's changed now from when I was working there, but when I worked there, this is how it was. And I was working there for a while, and they're like, we were never supposed to be brought down below 4 because just of the nature of, like, this is a suicide watch house. Like, this is pretty serious. People are here because they want to commit suicide. You should probably have all the staff there to make sure that nobody dies. And they would bring us down to numbers, so like 3. And even with one person being gone, that puts the workload onto another person to do their walks and to make sure like that everything's being done for everybody else, like showers and rec and like doing all this stuff for these guys. And there was one time where they brought us down, and during the daytime, you also have to do, so like medical comes to the house and you have to do the meds and you have to bring them out for their appointments, and they're all restrained. They're belly chained or handcuffed. You can't bring them out unrestrained. And so it's just a lot more hands-on. So when you bring it down to another person, like, or leave another person out of it, then there's more work that has to be done. So at this time, there was a lot going on, and it wasn't on my run specifically, but I hear on the radio, we have an inmate hanging. And I'm like, here in this house? Like, I start freaking out because I'm like, is it on my run? And then I'm looking around, and it's on one of the other runs. And so my coworker, he had put a guy in the shower, and they're not allowed to have towels like in their cells or anything, but when they're in the shower, they can have their towel dry off and they have to give the towel back. Well, he had tied the towel to the handle of the shower door and had tied it around his neck, and he like had dropped himself to where he's hanging from the towel like off the shower door. And in my head, I'm thinking like somehow I fucked up. Like, I'm gonna, I'm working this house. Somehow this is gonna like, So my coworker and I, like, he unties it, and it was tied pretty tight. He's like struggling, and like we didn't have the scissors on hand, so we're just trying to untie this thing. And we open the door, and he falls, and we're trying to render aid at that point. And thankfully, like, medical wasn't so far away, so they get there, and it was like one of those like shit, this was real. Like, it was the first really, like, I had experienced like fights and stuff before that, but that was kind of like the moment where I was like, yeah, this is real shit. And I never really experienced anything like close. Well, I did later on, but within the suicide watch house at that point, like, I didn't. That was the first and only time that I really experienced that. We were pretty good about making sure, but it was just one of those moments where like it was a mix of all the wrong things, right? Like, you're short-staffed, you're trying to get everything done, and I think because, nothing happened to us, right? Because we were doing our job, we were doing everything that we were supposed to. And it would have fallen back on the supervisors and admin, because it would have asked them, like, why wasn't this house staffed when it's supposed to be staffed? That would have prevented this. Like, we weren't the ones entirely responsible at that point. So, but he was fine. It was, caught it really early, so. Do
you feel like you were trained well enough to handle a situation like that? Like, is that something they teach you in training?
No. They tell you that it happens and that it can happen, and obviously it's our job to make sure it doesn't happen. But to actually handle something in that moment, a lot of people freeze, and I saw that a lot, later. People freeze in the moment, they don't know what to do. But I never really had a problem with that. It was like, okay, immediately we're going to handle this situation. So it was handled, but yeah, that was the first time where I was like, oh no.
Now, I know in the federal system, like, every quarter, the officers would switch to a new cell or a block or a rotation. Mm-hmm. Was that like that where you were?
Kind of. So especially the nature of the house, it's heavy. You deal with suicides or like suicidal ideation like every single day. And so I was there for 2 years, and then I went to, they had expanded the mental health program at that point to, it used to be the minors unit, and it was kind of like, we called it its own little like island because it was attached by gates, but it wasn't fully a part of like the Rincon unit. It was like its own little unit off to the side because that's where the minors used to be. And they turned it into another SMI program. There's only 2 houses. It was really small. But I ended up transferring over there after doing my time there. It wasn't that they, like, I didn't have to go, but I felt like it was time.
2 years is a long time to work one unit.
Yeah, it was a long time. Like, you feel it where you're like, okay, I'm kind of tired of this routine now. I need something else. And I wasn't giving my all to something anymore that I had initially been excited about, and now it was kind of like more like a drag. And a lot of it had to do with at the time that, and it'll come in handy later, but there was an inmate that was in there who had become like obsessed with me. And it was like funny to a point because he was crazy. Or he acted crazy. I couldn't say. But he would like call my name out for hours, even when I wasn't even working there. And like I would do overtime and people are like, "Oh, you're Reidhead. We know about you because this guy yells your name all the time." Yeah, so, and he was put into the low functioning house that was right next door to the suicide watch house. And there would come a point where when they were out at rec and we would be leaving because we were relieved for the day, he'd be waiting because he wanted to just come up and try to talk to me. And it got to a point where the other inmates wanted to beat him up because he was being so creepy. And so I was like, well, you know what? It's all right. I'm going to move next door to the other unit. I don't want to deal with this. So that's how it happened. And I was working there for, I want to say, like 6 or 7 months. And I really liked it. We had a good group there. And that was kind of like my really big oh shit moment where I was working a house and I was helping one of the psych staff get inmates. And again, it's the short staff where there was one of us working in the bubble, and the way that it works is that they can't leave the bubble. They're stuck there. And then I was the floor. And there were supposed to be 2 of us on the floor, but because we were short staffed, there was only one of us. So I was working the floor. And mind you, this house housed 100 inmates or so. So just me on the floor to 100 inmates that I have to manage. It can get pretty hectic, especially with the SMI population. So I was helping her, and I was getting guys out to medical, and there was like a gate in front of the house that separated the house from the rec field. So the rec field was like all in front of, was basically just the whole yard. And then you had like medical and like the admin building, and then the other house was right next door. But they would have to go like out to the rec field and then up to medical. And so I got them and I was opening the gate. And as I was opening the gate, there was an inmate. And like I said, under normal situations, it might be a red flag. But with the SMIs, they do weird stuff all the time. Like he's just like kind of walking in front. And I was like, okay. And he walked kind of a little ways to the side. So I opened the gate. And as soon as I opened the gate, he turns around and he comes at me. I didn't know that he had a pencil and he's stabbing me in the face. I thought that he was just punching me. And so, you know, it kicks in to where you just like, okay. And I tried to like grab him and like try to get him, like we're going to get to the ground. And we got to the ground. I'm trying to hold him, and these other 2 inmates, I could hear them, and they're trying to, and they're like, one of them is hitting him in the head, the other guy's trying to like hold his feet, and I'm telling them, no, like, you guys need to go, because in my head I'm thinking, well, if my help comes, like, they're gonna think that they're also a part of it, like attacking me or something. So I didn't want anybody else to be involved. And so, like, I'm trying to like hold him on the ground, and we're kind of like wrestling, and I see like blood just come off from like, it's on my arm, and I'm like, where am I bleeding from? Like, I had no idea. Like, there's blood, I don't know where I'm bleeding from. And I didn't even have time or really think to like get my radio. I just needed to get him to the ground. Thankfully, the psych staff that I had been helping, she had gotten over the radio, and she's like screaming into it, like, staff assault, staff assault. But the problem is that she was on the big yards channel, not our little yards channel. So her yelling went over the radio on the other side, and she's like, staff assault, house 11, which is, people know, is like on our side. So they all heard it over there, and they're like, oh, it's over here. Like, so they're calling over to our unit, like, you guys have a staff assault. And so, you know, all of a sudden, and I don't know any of this at the time, obviously. I'm like wrestling with this guy in the dirt. So all of a sudden, all these guys, like, I hear them, they're like running, and they're like holding on to him, and they're like, you're good, you're good. Like, they're trying to, you know, they get him. And so I went into that, like, immediately I'm just like, okay, I need to get like the leg irons. So, because they had the handcuffs, but they didn't have like leg irons for him. Because for the SMIs, what they had was called a restraint chair. So if you're going to like escort somebody in this situation, you know, you're going to put them in the chair so that you can escort them wherever you need to be, so they're not harming themselves or you. So I go into the house, and the guy that was working the bubble, like, and again, I didn't see my face. I don't know what I look like at this point, but I had like kind of smeared or like rubbed my face. You know, my hair is kind of crazy. So he looks at me, and his face is just like, and I'm like, I need the leg irons. Give me the leg irons. And there's like a little trap, you know, that that's how we're communicating. You like put stuff through it. And he puts paper towels into the trap. I was like, I don't need paper towels. I need the leg irons. So he gives me the leg irons, and like I grab the paper towels, but like I don't know the extent of like what my face looks like. So I don't think why do I need paper towels? I know I'm bleeding, but like I didn't know what I looked like. So I get the leg irons and put them on him, and you know, there's a bunch of people there at that point. So they're like, get her away, get her to medical. Because like if you're involved in a situation, the first thing that they want to do is remove you, so that if anything happens, you're not like, there's no like revenge or retaliation or anything involved in it. So, and I think I remember him, the inmate, and mind you, like, I didn't have any interaction with this inmate prior. Like, I knew him, obviously, because he was there, but we'd had no bad prior interaction, nothing at all. It was just so random to me. And he was, like, cussing at me from the ground and stuff, and, like, I was just like, I don't even know you, like, you know? And so I go to medical, and, like, everyone that I'm passing, and, like, I remember walking, like, the rec field, and I'm, like, smiling, and people are just like, what is wrong? Like, I had blood all over my face. I went to medical, and I saw, like, I looked in the mirror, and there was, like, blood. Like, I had smeared it, because, like, when I, like, wiped out of my eyes, like, I had smeared it all over my face. And it was under the eye and on my lip and on the side of my head that he had got me. And I remember walking up, and everyone's just like, oh, my God, like, you look terrible. You have blood all over your face. Yeah, I was like, okay, this really happened to me. I was severely attacked. You know, people say that you can be, and people have even, you know, died working in prison, but, like, I never thought it would happened to me, I thought that, I treated people pretty respectfully. I was fair, firm, fair, and consistent. I felt like I followed all of that. And I was like, what happened? Like, I couldn't even, like, really wrap my head around, like, why this even happened until I remembered that, with an SMI population, you don't even have to have a reason. They just can be unpredictable that way.
How bad were the puncture wounds?
It's definitely not as bad as it seemed initially. I do have a scar underneath my eye, and it bled for a while. I had to go to urgent care, and they put glue on it, but like I didn't need stitches or anything. I think just because of facial wounds, it just bleeds a lot more, and like having been in like martial arts and stuff, anytime like you're hitting the head or the face or something, it tends to like bleed a lot more. But when he was taken to, so like immediately after a situation like this happens, they're taken to the suicide watch house. And he had said to the guys that escorted him that he wanted to gouge my eyes out with a razor blade, the razor blade that he had in his pocket. But for some reason, he decided to use a pencil, and he broke the pencil on my face. They found it in pieces. And I only really heard about this at first because I heard it over the radio. They said, oh, the weapon's been recovered. And I was like, weapon? Like, I don't even know what was used. Like, at first I thought it was like his dirty long fingernails. And I started freaking out because I'm like, I don't even know what's under, like, you know what I mean? I could have something, like I have to take that big pill that they make you take for Hep C or something. But like I started worrying about that. And no, I heard that it was the pencil and all of that was like a crime scene. And it turned into a whole thing where when I came, so the deputy warden called me after that, and he's like, if you need to take time, you can take time. And I said, no, I'll be back to work on my Monday, because it was my Friday at that point, and my Monday was going to be on like Wednesday or something. I was like, no, I'll be back. And I think a lot of that was, it's like, I'm going to, not that I need to prove it, but I wanted, like, I'm tough. I can handle it. Like, I'm good. I don't need to take time, or people, in my head, I'm thinking people would judge me for feeling some type of way about it. I felt like I need to prove myself almost. Like, no, I got it handled. Like, I can go through something like that and, like, come out. Like, I'm fine. And so I didn't. I came back the next work day. Everyone kind of expected me to take time off because, in that field, it's like you're given time off, like, you're going to take time off. But it was more of a pride thing for me where, like, he's not going to, make me afraid of my job or, like, hurt me or whatever. But I remember the day before, I had told the guy that I was dating at the time, he worked there, it's like I'm kind of nervous to go back to work, And I was. Obviously, like, something like that happens, like, you're going to be kind of anxious and nervous to go back to the environment. Like, what else can happen, But I'm like, well, the sooner I get back there, the sooner that I face it, the sooner that I can just push it down and continue doing what I've always done with trauma, just push it down and continue on. And so that's what I did. And he ended up getting street charged, and I had to go through. So street charges, the Pima County attorney's office, they charged him for like assault on an officer. So I had to go through. I didn't go to the court hearings, but they would notify me of all the court hearings that he was going through. And I did go to his sentencing because the judge asked me to give a statement, like a victim's impact statement. And it was interesting going through the process as a victim because I had never, you know, I've gone through stuff, but I'd never gone through the court system before, especially as a victim. So it was an interesting process for me where I kind of got an insight into how it works and like to hear the victim's side of it. And I made a statement, and his mental health was definitely taken into account. I think he only ended up getting like 18 months or 2 years or something like that added to his time. But I mean, you know, it was traumatic for me, but like in the scope of harm done, like it was pretty minimal, I guess you could say. I'm happy it was done to me and not to other COs that I was working with who might not have handled it as well or as much as I did. Like I had the previous martial arts experience, like wrestled him to the ground, like we're doing this, whereas they might have gotten more injured or, you know, emotionally I felt like I could handle it. I don't know.
Do you think it's tougher to be a female correctional officer in a male facility than it is to be a male?
100%. 100%. There's two sides to it, right? So it's hard to be the female CO to male inmates because a lot of them, one, they just look at you as something, as a potential to use. And that's really all I looked at it as. Like, you're just looking as a way to get something out of me. That's all it is. Like, you don't care, you know? Like, they don't care about you. They just, like, want to figure out ways to exploit you. And then two, they don't respect you because a lot of them, I mean, honestly, hate women. You know, like, they don't want to take directives from a woman. They don't feel like they should listen to you. And it just is what it is. And then on the other side, you know, being a woman working with, like, other male coworkers, it's, like, the same thing. Like, you could be in a situation where, like, they don't really respect you because you're a woman and they don't feel like you can do the job the same, or it's unequal in the sense that they don't really trust that you can have their back the same way that a male officer can. And I get that. And then at the same time, you're also just another person that they want to try to hook up with, which is it's a whole other thing. But yeah, so it's definitely hard. You feel like you have to prove a lot all the time. Like you're always on. And it's also harder to build rapport in the same way with the inmates because, you know, you want to give the same level of respect, but at the same time, you know, you can't talk too much to this inmate, otherwise somebody might think something, or you can't spend a certain amount of time, you know, talking to so-and-so, or, you know, people just like to have stuff in their heads, or like this inmate gets upset because you're talking to him about something, and you know what I mean? There's like a jealousy thing sometimes, or, you know, it can be difficult. You know, you try your best to be respectful, and sometimes, you know, things just happen. People just don't like you.
Yeah, I feel like you have to teeter that line of you don't want to be flirtatious or too nice, but you also want to treat them with the same respect that you would treat someone else in any situation. But some people take it the wrong way, just like in the free world outside of prison, men take someone's kindness the wrong way.
Yeah, exactly. And I would run into that where I'm like, you know, I'm being respectful and like we're talking, we're laughing about a TV show or something. Like, this doesn't mean I'm in love with you. So, you know, there's always that line that you have to keep. And that was in my head. Like, when I had gone through my trauma, I always thought in my head, like, you know, people just want to exploit you. Like, that level of trust wasn't there for anybody. So I get into this job, and in my head, I'm just thinking, like, you're acting like you care, but you don't care. I know you don't care. Like, you just want to find a way to exploit or take advantage of whatever you think it is that I have. And so it was really easy for me to, like, keep that line where I'm just like, look, I can talk to you and I'm respectful and I'm nice, but that's as far as it goes.
Did you see female officers that kind of cross the line or put a little too much out there?
I mean, there were incidents where they were nothing that I really saw firsthand. I mean, you hear like the stories, like there were a few females that quit or got fired because of certain things, but nothing that I saw directly or that I was like directly involved with at all. Like it was always like someone from a different unit or someone from a different shift, like someone that I didn't really know personally, but within like my scope of what I saw, it didn't really happen. People were pretty good about keeping the line, and for men too, because it happens for men too. You would hear rumors for men as well that they were under investigation or fired because they were bringing stuff in or whatever, and it didn't happen as often as people think it does. And a lot of the times the rumors are just rumors. Like it goes through an investigation and nothing comes out of it, or people think that things are happening and really there's nothing happening. So
Do you think male inmates respect female officers or male officers more?
it depends. I saw both. I saw them definitely respect female officers. Like in the situation where the male inmate stepped in, I don't think they necessarily would have done that for a male CO getting beat up. But some of them have that old school mentality where it's like you don't hit women, even if they're COs. Like you're not gonna hit them. And with the SMIs, it was kind of different because they're a different population. They have different, baselines where they don't have those standards. But a lot of them were of that old school mentality where they kept that, where like they were more respectful to me than my male coworkers. And so sometimes like if things were happening, they would send me in to go talk to so and so because they felt like I could handle the situation a little bit better. But then there were other times where the men didn't want to listen to me. They were like, I don't know if it was like mom issues or something, but they didn't respect me. They just didn't want to hear anything I had to say. And it was not because of me personally. It was just they found like more rapport with the male coworkers than with me. And that's kind of one of the things working there that you just have to not take personal is like you're not going to please everybody. Like you're not going to have the respect of everybody, even if you don't do anything wrong. It's just the way that it is in the nature of the job.
Did you always work the SMI unit or did you eventually shift?
No, I was there the entire time.
Entire 7 years?
The entire 7 years.
Is that common or?
No, usually people will switch around. So what they used to do when I started working there is they would have a unit limit. So it would be, I think, 5 years at the time, where they would be a limit of only working 5 years, and then you'd have to switch units. Well, COVID hit, and then it was so short-staffed that they took that away. So they were no longer doing unit rotations. And it was hard getting people to want to work at my unit because just of the nature of the job. It was 12 hours. It was long. There's a lot of work, especially during the day shift. You're pretty much doing everything. You're doing all the turnouts. You're doing rec, showers, phone calls, everything. And also dealing on top of that with an unstable population. And especially after going through what I went through. And after that happened, it spread. Like everybody knew what happened. And even like people from different complexes, like I remember this sergeant came down to do overtime one night, and I was staying to do overtime on the night shift. And I was talking to him, and somehow it got on the topic because, my friends, they like to bring it up, that I block things with my face. It's just like a joke sometimes, you have to find the dark humor in the things that happen. But he was like, "Oh, that was you? Oh, I heard about that." And we're like, it's crazy. Like things just spread. And that was the worst one that happened, but it definitely wasn't the last one. It was like 4 or 5 months after that where I was assaulted again. And this time it was a PC move. He just didn't want to lock down. He wanted to move, and the move wasn't being done fast enough that he wanted it. So the quickest way to move, assault a CO. So he was like unpacking his stuff from his cell, and I was like, what are you doing? He's like, well, I'm gonna move. I'm like, well, no, you're not. And I was like, there's like a time there, we have to figure this out. I can't let you just move. There's like a whole process that has to be done. And he's like, well, if I'm not gonna move right now, we're gonna fight. So I was like, okay. So he comes at me and he's throwing hands, and I'm like, okay, we're gonna throw hands. So like he tries to grab my hair, which I'm like let's throw hands, don't grab my hair like we're girls here. I mean, I am, but So he tries to grab my hair, I get a hit in, and as I do, like I'm trying to like come back and
You're good.
okay. As I do, I'm trying to, wrap him up again, and like we're in the hallway this time instead of like outside. So I, slam him up against the door, and then the bubble officer had called it in because he saw it, and funny enough, my ex was the responder, so he's like beating on him too, and like we're trying to like cuff him up, and I got a few hits like on my head, but it wasn't. He didn't hit hard, so.
Another day in the life.
Another day. It was another Tuesday, but it was, just another thing that added to this, like, okay, I guess this is like, I'm doing real prison. And I didn't tell my family that this stuff was going on. I mean, it's just not something that I wanted to worry them about. I mean, I remember when I got stabbed, my sergeant had me call my emergency contact, which was my dad, and he's like, you need to call him and just let him know. I was like, no, I don't. He's like, just you need to call him and just like let him know. So I told him, I was like, hey, something happened at work, like I'm fine, but I'm gonna go to urgent care. And of course he's like, what happened? Like, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, I'm fine. It's just a little altercation. Like, I'm good. And it wasn't until like a little while later where I kind of like went into the whole story and told them, but they didn't even realize like the level of threats that we were really exposed to. I mean, a lot of my family members would ask like, well, you carry guns, right? I'm like, no, we don't carry guns.
Did you even carry pepper spray, or was that only for the higher security officers?
No, we all carried pepper spray, and I used it. There was a lot of fights where I would use it, but when you're in like a close contact like that, you're throwing hands. You want to create the distance to spray, but at the same time, like you want to get them on the ground. You want to close the distance rather than create distance. I mean, they tell you to create distance to like get away, but for me, I was like, no, I'm gonna get them on the ground, get them in handcuffs. Because if there's distance, there's more ways for them to come back and attack me. So, but if I'm, wrapping them up, if we're on the ground, then, the level of threat isn't so much anymore. But the physical altercations were definitely interesting. It was the sexual ones that were not. There was, and it didn't happen. It was pretty rare for things like this to happen, but there was this inmate, and again, it's SMI, and I had called him out to see psych, because they have like regular psych meetings that they have to do. And so I had called him out, and I'm just like, hey, I need to see psych, and I'm just going to escort you into the room. And he stops, and I'm like looking, and I'm just like, okay, what are you doing? And he looks at me, and he's like, can I fuck you? And then he drops his pants and starts masturbating in front of me. And I'm like, it's one of those where you're like, what is even going, like, and I turned because like the bubble window was like right there, and my bubble officer's in there, and he's like he has this look of like, what in the fuck is going on? And I'm like, I get on the radio, and I'm like, I'm initiating for assault. I just, like, I don't even know what to say over the radio. Cause what are you going to say? Like, as the nature of the incident, like, he's masturbating in front of me. Like, so, and I turn around and I go into, like, the bubble, and I'm telling the male officer that's in there, I was like, you deal with him. Cause if I do it, I'm going to get in trouble because I'm going to beat his ass right now. So he goes out there and the guy, he's just, he still going at it. And the officer's like, tells him, and as soon as the guy comes out there, of course, he like pulls up his pants, and then he just turns around and he cuffs up. And it was just one of those, like, totally unnecessary, like, why do I even have to be subjected to this kind of situations? And because of the nature of the incident, they call it CIU, which is the Criminal Investigation Unit. They investigate, the crimes that happen. And because of the nature, they're like, okay, well, we need to interview you, and you need to give us, like, the full, like, what happened. So I told them, and, like, I was trying not to, like, laugh, but I'm like, this is so stupid. But also it's not stupid, because it's like, my male coworkers don't have to do this. Like, they don't get subjected to this, but, like, I do. And I was just, like, more angry at him at that point. And so, like, I get back, and it's, like, the next day, and we're turning out for chow. And so they had put me up working main control. And again, it's a small unit, so it's, like, not really that busy. And you have, like, the cameras and main control, and you're there for the whole day. Like, you don't come out onto the yard. And I see a fight happening on one of the cameras. Well, in that house, 2 other inmates were beating up that inmate. Like, they had kept him on the yard. They didn't move him off or anything. And so they were beating him up. And they're like, you're going to disrespect the female staff like that by doing something totally outrageously crazy. That's to, like, do that. Like, they beat him up. And honestly, I didn't fault them for it. In fact, afterwards, like, I went and I was like, thank you, Like, you did what I couldn't do. And there was some level of, like, prison justice there. And they're like, well, yeah, well, you treat us all with respect. Like, we're not going to just let that happen to you. So, that was kind of one of those moments where I'm like, okay, well, there's some justice in these situations sometimes.
Do these SMI inmates have their own type of prison politics too?
They do. It's not, like I said, it's not super, like, race related or, like, but they have their own gangs too. Like, I can't tell you what they are because I didn't really get into the politics that much, but they definitely have their own way of doing things in their own code, and each house is different too. Like, just the setup of people that you have in there, they have, I guess, like, heads of the house. It's usually the porters that are, like, the ones running stuff, but each house, each yard is different in the way that they interact with each other, and with SMIs especially, like, it's usually the higher functioning ones that are, handling everything, and sometimes you even get, we called hideouts, which were, like, people who were not really SMI, but somehow got into the program, and they really weren't supposed to be there. They just didn't want to be on, like, a regular yard, but they were problems because they would take advantage of the lower functioning inmates a lot. So, like, if you have a lower functioning inmate who had a lot of money on his books or had family who supported him or had a lot of store, like, they're going to target that guy because they wanted what he had, and they would use him to get money or whatever. So there's a lot of paying attention to things like that were happening, because we would tell supervisors, we would tell, like, the psych staff. The psych staff would even sometimes tell us, like, hey, I think this is happening. So we would work together a lot. Like, the psych staff were there every single day, and they were seeing these guys every single day. Like, they had regular programming, regular, like, classes, and then also, like, individual sessions that we would have to do with them. So we would make sure that that wouldn't happen, but obviously you can't really help it all the time. Sometimes it happens.
Now, when you're working a 12-hour shift, do you feel like you're an inmate in a way yourself, just being locked in there? I imagine you can't have your phone.
Yeah, we weren't allowed our phones, or anything other than like what we were issued. No books, magazines, like literally nothing. So yeah, it was a lot like we were doing time with them, and even like the inmates would joke that, we were doing time with them too, and I did a lot of overtime. Like I said, I buried myself in work a lot just to not deal with a lot that was going on. It was kind of like, and they would tell you, don't make work your escape, but I made work my escape. So I did a lot of overtime, and so they'd be like, you're here with us more than you are with your friends or family. I'm just like, well, it's not because I like you guys at all, just the paychecks. So yeah, I mean, but it's true. Like, I would be there more than I would see my family, and it definitely hurt, later on when things were going on with my family that I just wasn't involving myself with. It was April of 2023 when my brother passed away from a fentanyl overdose. And I knew that things were bad, but like I said, I was away. I was just trying to be busy with work and not be involved with like the drama that was there all the time. Because like even with family relationships, like you want to be there, but there's also boundaries that you have to have if like people don't want help, which he didn't want. He just wanted to be on a spiral that at some point you just have to be like, well, I need to, for my own mental health, for my own like sanity, I have to create a boundary with you. And so for my family, it was like, well, I'm not going to see you that much. It was probably like every couple months that I would see him, even though we live in the same town. But it was just hard for me because like I'm a doer, like if you come to me for advice, I'm going to tell you like, okay, this is what you need to do. Like, let's make an action plan. And it was always just like coming to me for advice, but never following through. And then like when you try to help them, they don't want the help. So then you're like, well, like, what am I even here for? And so after that happened, it was hard to be at work because you have a lot, like I said, there was a lot of substance abuse in the prison and people making jokes about it. And there was even, it was while I wasn't working that day, but one of the inmates in the house that I had regularly worked at, he had an overdose. It was like around the same time that my brother died. And it was like same thing. It was fentanyl. And he went to the hospital and he came back and he was joking about it. How, oh yeah, I'll do it again. And I just get so angry. I just remember getting so angry, like, you lived, but my brother didn't. And I didn't know how to reconcile that as far as like a professional standpoint, like how to maintain like how am I supposed to treat you like everybody else when like I have these like personal, and they tell you to like leave your personal life at the door, and you really try to, but sometimes things just happen like this that are so like they can be traumatic and you really don't know how to like handle it. And I think I did a pretty good job. I mean, it's not like I said anything or, went off on him or anything, but it's like it just kind of colors the way that you approach them and your work.
Did you ever encounter inmates that were serving time for sexual assault? And if so, how did you react towards that as someone that was a victim yourself in high school?
Yeah, it was pretty common actually. In fact, I think like one of my porters was. It's just the compartmentalization and, just the nature of, the SMI. There was no, like, you couldn't have this crime or this crime. There were, child molesters. There were people in for murder. Like, it was a high custody yard, so these people were in for really serious things. And a lot of the times I didn't want to know what they had done. Like, some of my coworkers liked to look up the charges, and you could easily, like, look it up online, but I didn't want to know. I was like, because it's going to affect the way that I do my job. Like, if I know that you're a child molester or a rapist, like, it's going to, like, I'm not going to be able to treat you the same way that I would treat anybody else. And being fair and consistent was important to me because I wanted to do good at my job. I wanted to be, you know, a decent CO. Like, that's, you know, that was my job, and I wanted to be, you know, do the best that I could be at it. Because that's kind of just how I approach things in life in general. Is just, I'm here, I'm going to do the best that I can in whatever it is that I'm doing, even if I don't always agree with the nature of what I'm doing. And it got to that point where I was like, what am I even doing here anymore? Am I even doing anything good here anymore? But yeah, I was pretty cognizant of not letting my personal traumas try to color how because, you know, they weren't the ones that affected me, right? I mean, I could look at it that way, like, you know, a rapist to one, a rapist to all, but, like, I try not to take it personal. And I think that's a really important aspect of the job is, like, you'll come in, you know, everybody comes in with traumas, but you just can't let it be the thing that holds you back from actually being good at your job, and you just have to put those on the back burner.
Those inmates that do those types of crimes, do you see a common theme across all of their individual personalities?
No, honestly, it's kind of crazy because, like, you could be talking to somebody that you might think is just like a regular dude or just looks like somebody that you wouldn't even notice, like, on the street, but they had done something really terrible. And that was also a hard thing to reconcile for being on the outside, is, like, you really never know someone's intentions or who someone actually is. And just having worked in the job for so long, you start to not trust anybody on the outside as well as on the inside. And, like, I already didn't trust anybody, so it wasn't really a difference for me. But, you know, for people that weren't really exposed to anything before, now you're suddenly like, oh, like, this guy could be my neighbor, and he's, you know, a serial child molester. Like, that's insane. Like, you can't really wrap your head around that level of, like, depravity, but this person looks normal. And so it's just one of those hard things that you have to deal with. And but also at the same time, like, they're there already being punished. You know, I can't punish you again by being, like, too difficult or too hard or, like, a super cop on you. Like, I'm, you know, it's, again, with the firm, fair, and consistent, they would drill into us from day one. Like, you just have to leave your personal issues at the door and treat everybody the same.
Did that feeling of not feeling like you were being positive, like doing a positive thing in your life, because you went into this career for advocacy work, did that help push you out the door to leave corrections?
Yeah. So I eventually was just like, I had gotten my master's in criminal justice, and I wanted to get into parole. It was, I think, the beginning of 2023 when I started the program, and then I graduated in like the middle of 2024. And I was like, I need to do something other than just being a CO. Like, I need to do more. And so I originally thought that I could do parole because, you know, you're working with reentry, you're helping them find placements, you know, on the outside, you're working with like recovery on some level, you know. But even that, it got to a point where I was like, you know, I'm working in a system that, like, I really even don't think is useful to begin with. Like, I'm part of this system, and I don't want to be a part of this system anymore. And, like, I see it every day where it's not working. You know, one of the inmates that had beat up that guy, for, I don't want to say for me, but like, you know, he had beat up that guy and he had gotten released. And then we found out from our CO3, which is like the program side of it, they're like on the same level as a sergeant, but they're like on the program side almost. He said that he had died of an overdose like 3 days after being released. And like having talked to him, obviously, for a long time, because you pretty much have the same population for a while. You know, higher custody, they're in for a long time. There's really not like a whole, you know, influx of new people or like in and out, in and out. It's just like you pretty much have the same population for a while, like the release here and there. But so I had known him for a long time. And he was just like, yeah, I'm excited to get out. Like, I'm going to, you know, be with my girl and like it's exciting. And then come to find out that he had died 3 days later. I was just like, where was the failure? You know? What could have been done to like help this individual be successful, like once released? Like what could anything have been done? I don't know. You know, like obviously somebody who's dealing with substance abuse issues, like having seen that personally, it's hard. And then, you know, you're without it for so long and then like you get out and you think like, oh, I could try it, you know? And then that's it. I don't know. I don't really know what the answer is, but I definitely didn't want to be a part of the problem anymore. So I quit in October of 2024 and I applied to law school again. I was like, I'm going to fulfill this dream that I had, and I'm actually in a position where I feel like, you know, I can do something other than what I had been doing, actually be helpful and feel like I'm doing better advocacy work than I was like in the prison system. And so I got accepted, and that's what I'm doing now. I go to Mitchell Hamlin School of Law, and I'm excited. So I'm hoping that, you know, my future is kind of better than the you know, the prison system and the walls that I was in. And I don't really know exactly what that's going to look like, but I'm hoping to get into like juvenile defense, criminal defense, doing just better work, being that person that a lot of people didn't have to advocate for them. I mean, you see a lot that people can't afford like a good lawyer, you know, somebody that actually cares about their case, or people, you know, public defenders are often so overwhelmed by caseloads that, you know, you're just kind of going through the motions, and, you know, you need somebody to actually care to really see some justice. And I don't know if, like, you know, I'm going to do anything, but I don't know, the hope is there. It's a lot more than I had before, so.
Well, you definitely bring a unique experience to that type of law as a correctional officer for so many years in a higher custody facility. I mean, how many lawyers probably have that experience in the criminal defense world, actually experiencing what the people they're representing could go through?
I don't think a lot, and to be honest, I think a lot of them could use the experience. I mean, just at least, you know, be there for a few days, see what it's actually like on the inside, see what you're sentencing these people to. You know, you see it a lot where, and I'm not like hating on prosecuting attorneys, but you just get, you know, this idea in your head that you're doing justice, but sometimes justice doesn't always look like sending the bad guy to jail, you know? There's a lot more that can be done, and I don't think that there's a lot of rehabilitation going on in the prison system at all. Like, I saw it, like, it wasn't happening. And a lot of what they claimed were, you know, rehabilitative programs, it wasn't even being offered to high custody inmates or SMI inmates. So how can you rehabilitate these people if you're not even giving them the opportunity? Like, you're just locking them in, throw away the key, and then you expect when they get released that, oh, all of a sudden they're going to be functional members of society. It's just not going to happen.
Do you want to own your own practice, or do you want to work with another firm?
I think originally I wanted to own my own practice, and like, so my dad has his, and then I'd be able to kind of like stem off of his. But I think the best route for me would be to get experience actually working, in the system and getting that like litigation practice before I go into, private work. I think obviously private work is where the money is, but I'm not in it for the money at all. It's more like this has become like my passion. So it's more of just following that. And eventually I would like to do more with like juvenile defense, which is kind of hard if you're like in the system, you're kind of just like given whatever's thrown to you. But if I can get to a point where I'm, picking and choosing my cases, that's something that I'm more aligned to, just because, the change starts early. A lot of, and I tell this to people too, because people are like, well, how can you be in the correction system? You see all these bad guys, and then all of a sudden you want to like represent the bad guys. Like, well, it doesn't even make any sense. I'm like, well, you look at like a level playing field. A lot of these people did not have a level playing field. If you come from broken homes and, drug abuse and a lot of violence, sexual violence growing up, like you're not going to be on the same level as somebody that grew up with both parents in the house, there was no money issues, no drug issues, you know what I mean? Like, it's not the same world. And a lot of people don't realize that. And so for kids especially, they need somebody to advocate for them. And a lot of times people see the things that the kids do and they're just like, well, they're a bad kid and they're not going to amount to anything, so whatever, So you actually need people to advocate for them who actually care about them.
Does it feel weird going from a job like that for 7 years to now just being in school and not going to a job like that every day?
It is. I tell people, I'm like, it's like being in a toxic relationship. Like, you miss it even though you know that you shouldn't miss it. Yeah, it's that adrenaline, and it's that like high, like fast-paced environment, and where like things are going on every day, and it's like always something new, and like a part of you does miss it. But I mean, I know it's for the better that I'm not in it. So, and I'm actually, going on to better things. So it is a hard adjustment, and it was like I kind of struggled with it for a little bit, but I'm definitely not in that place anymore.
What's something you wish that some of the inmates you were supervising knew about you that could have helped, make your job a little bit easier and kind of have them look at you in a different light?
I know that they're not supposed to like know personal things about you, but a lot of them, and especially like I said, like SMI, they're the center of their world, where it's like we're people too, and we come with our own traumas, our own baggage, and sometimes like we deal with it one day, and then we come to work the next day, and then we have to deal with, the comments that you make or the things that you're doing. Like, after my brother passed away, it was like I'm dealing with this, and you want me to care about your dinner sack that's missing a cookie. Like, it's trivial, but that's something that they really care about. And so like it was hard for me to like put that away and to care about what it is in the moment in my job. And it's like with any job, you have stuff going on at home, and then you go to work and you're like, why do I care about this thing? Like, it doesn't matter because I have all this other stuff going on. And like on some level, it would have been nice. But at the same time, even if they had known, I don't know if they would have necessarily cared, or they could have just been like, well, I had a brother die too, or like, I had all this stuff happen, but like, oh well. So, I mean, who's to say?
Now that there's been a good amount of time that's passed since you left, is there anything you wish you did differently on the job?
I definitely wouldn't have tried so hard to prove myself. Just being there is proving yourself. You signed up for the job, you're there. Like, you don't need to put it so... I didn't need to put it on myself so much that, like, I had something to prove, or that, like, I had to be this like good coworker or this like, you know, to my sergeants. I didn't have to like be the yes man for things that, you know, really didn't matter. But because I really just wanted to be reliable, I wanted to be a good worker. I wanted that reputation. And I really didn't have anything to prove. I think it was all in my head that, you know, I was like, I'm a female and I'm here and I'm going to like do my best and everyone's going to know that I'm, you know, I'm strong and I'm tough. And I don't think I had to prove any of that. I think it was just, you know, that I had it in my head that I had to.
Well, Jaycee, I appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming and opening up. And I wish you the best of law school and everything to come in the future.
Thank you.